The space station drifted silently in the vast emptiness of the outer rim, a lonely sentinel watching over a quiet sector of the galaxy. Commander Rylan had been stationed there for almost 5 years. Far away from the bustling core systems and the comfort of populated planets, the station was old, patched together from modules that had seen decades of service, but it was functional, and that was all that mattered in a sector where danger was measured not in lawlessness but in the silent, unpredictable void. Most days were uneventful, filled with routine scans, maintenance checks, and communication logs. Life here was monotonous, predictable, and often lonely. But it was exactly what Rylan and his team had trained for, a place where vigilance was more than duty. It was survival, on a seemingly ordinary day. As the station's sensors hummed their constant song, a faint anomaly appeared on the long-range scanners. At first it seemed like a glitch, something that could be ignored. But Rylan, a man with instincts honed by years of service, noticed the irregularities in the signal pattern. It was unlike any routine cosmic radiation, asteroid drift, or natural interference the station had encountered before. There was an intelligence to it, a rhythm that suggested purpose. He called over Lieutenant Mara, his communications expert, to examine it. Mara was sharp, precise, and unshakably calm in situations that would make most people panic. Together they scrutinized the signal, comparing it against countless databases of known civilizations, distress calls, and cosmic anomalies. Nothing matched. That the signal was peculiar in more ways than one. Its frequency jumped unpredictably, yet there was a strange consistency beneath the chaos. It carried encoded data, fragments of something that hinted at urgency, desperation, and an unfamiliar sophistication. Rylan felt a chill run down his spine. In his decades of experience he had intercepted distress calls before, from colonies far across the sector, from explorers lost in uncharted systems. But this was different. It had a weight to it, a presence that seemed almost alive. Mara looked at him and said quietly, "Sir, this isn't a normal distress call. Whoever or whatever sent this knows we're listening. It wants us to hear it." The weight of that realization settled heavily on Rylan's shoulders. Protocol dictated caution. Any unknown signal could be a trap, a probe sent to lure ships into danger. The Council had strict rules about engaging with unidentified civilizations, especially in sectors where reports of hostile alien activity were rare but not unheard of. But there was something compelling about the signal. It pulsed with a rhythm that was impossible to ignore, as though it were calling directly to them, imploring them to act. Ours turned into a tense day as the team worked tirelessly to decode the fragments of data embedded in the signal. Every attempt revealed more complexity, mathematical sequences that hinted at navigation coordinates, structural patterns that suggested maps of some kind, and faint bursts of energy that could only be interpreted as warnings. The more they decoded, the more it became clear that this was not merely a random message. It was a carefully crafted communication, designed to reach them specifically. Mara worked feverishly at her console, sweat forming on her brow despite the cold, recycled air of the station. Her fingers flew across the holographic keyboard, manipulating layers of code that twisted and turned in ways that no human-made system should have allowed. By the end of the cycle, they had uncovered part of the truth. The signal originated from a remote sector, one that had been deemed uninhabitable for centuries. Official records had marked it as a dead zone, a place where no human or alien ship had survived more than a few weeks. Yet here was proof of life, or something that wanted to be recognized as life, sending a message so urgent that it had somehow pierced the distance, the silence, and the emptiness of space. Rylan felt a mixture of awe and fear. He had trained to face cosmic anomalies, hostile ships, and rogue systems, but he had never encountered a signal with this level of intent. It felt personal, as if the universe itself had decided to speak directly to him. After extensive analysis, the team traced the coordinates more precisely. The location was farther than any supply route, farther than the nearest Allied fleet, and dangerously close to regions where reports of hostile alien activity had been recorded in ancient archives. It was a place that no one dared explore lightly. Yet the data suggested something extraordinary, a civilization that had survived untold hardships, a race that might possess technology and knowledge far beyond human understanding. Rylan realized that ignoring the signal was no longer an option. To do nothing would mean missing a chance to uncover secrets that could change the balance of power in the galaxy, and perhaps even the fate of humanity itself. Still, the risk was undeniable. The station's council liaison warned of the dangers. Any unauthorized investigation could trigger political backlash, military scrutiny, or even an unintentional war. But Rylan was no stranger to difficult choices. He weighed the potential knowledge, the moral imperative to respond to a call for help, against the very real possibility of disaster. The decision was clear to him. Though it would not be easy to convince others, they had to answer the call. Preparations began immediately. The station's shuttle bays were prepped, and small reconnaissance vessels were readied for departure. Every crew member knew the stakes. Every protocol was double. Mara, normally quiet and methodical, allowed a rare glimmer of excitement to show. "Sir," she said, "whatever is out there, it's waiting for us, and we're about to find out why." The words hung in the air, charged with anticipation and an unspoken fear. As the shuttle engines powered up, a strange stillness filled the station. The usual hum of machinery seemed distant, as though space itself was holding its breath. The signal pulsed once more, stronger this time, and Ryland couldn't shake the feeling that the universe had chosen this moment, that it had singled them out to bear witness to something unprecedented. He looked around at his team, each face marked by determination and anxiety, and realized that whatever awaited them, they were united in purpose. When the shuttle finally departed the station, it moved into the darkness of space with a quiet authority. The stars stretched infinitely, glittering like shards of light across a black canvas. Yet none could prepare them for what lay ahead. The signal had done more than guide them. It had awakened a curiosity, a sense of duty, and an understanding that the galaxy was far larger, stranger, and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. As the vessel traveled, the crew studied the signal continuously, its messages becoming more complex and urgent with every pass. Patterns emerged, warnings of dangers, hints at civilizations that had fallen, and fragments of history that spoke of a race capable of immense power and devastating wrath. It was clear that the signal had been sent deliberately, with intelligence and purpose, and that the consequences of ignoring it would be catastrophic. The realization sent a shiver through the crew. They were no longer merely explorers, they were participants in a story that had been unfolding long before humanity existed. By the time they neared the source, the tension had reached a fever pitch. The signal's pulses grew faster, almost frantic, as if urging them to hurry. Every instrument aboard the shuttle registered anomalies, gravitational shifts, energy fluctuations, and interference that no human technology could fully explain. The crew exchanged nervous glances. This was no ordinary mission, no simple rescue or reconnaissance. Whatever awaited them, it was alive, aware, and capable of influencing events across vast distances. Ryland leaned over the navigation console, his eyes fixed on the approaching coordinates. "Prepare for anything," he said, his voice steady but heavy with anticipation. Mara nodded, her fingers dancing over the controls, decoding the final layers of the signal in real. They were entering a region that had been described in legend, a sector whispered about in old pilot stories and cautionary tales. And yet, despite the fear, a strange exhilaration coursed through them. History was about to be made. As the shuttle crossed the threshold of the mysterious sector, the signal reached its peak intensity. A surge of energy, almost tactile, seemed to wash over the vessel. Lights flickered, sensors spiked, and for a brief moment, it felt as if the universe itself was communicating directly with them. In that instant, every member of the crew understood the magnitude of their mission. They were no longer passive observers. They had been chosen to respond, to witness, and perhaps to survive a challenge that could define the future of humanity. And so, propelled by curiosity, courage, and the unyielding call of the unknown, the shuttle moved forward, into darkness, into danger, into the very heart of a signal that had already begun to shape the fate of the galaxy. As the shuttle moved deeper into the unknown sector, tension aboard the vessel grew with every passing moment. Commander Ryland and his crew had left the relative safety of their station behind, and the emptiness of space seemed more profound than ever. Outside the viewport, stars stretched endlessly, glittering coldly against the black void. But there was more than emptiness here. There was a sense of anticipation, as if the universe itself was watching their every move. The strange signal continued to pulse, sometimes calm and melodic, other times sharp and insistent, urging them onward. Its rhythm was unnerving, and the crew could feel it, not just in the instruments, but almost physically, like a vibration in their bones. Mara, at her console, was the first to notice the subtle anomalies. "Sir, I'm seeing distortions in the energy readings," she said quietly, her eyes never leaving the holographic screens. "It's like the signal is interacting with something in this sector, something massive, and possibly dangerous." Ryland leaned over her shoulder, scanning the readout. He saw it too, irregular gravitational spikes, brief but extreme energy surges, and patterns that no human-made system could explain. They were approaching a region of space that had been considered uninhabitable for centuries, yet the signal had led them directly to it. Meanwhile, back at the command center of the station, higher authorities debated what to do. Some advisors insisted that the shuttle turn back immediately. They argued that the sector was known for unpredictable cosmic phenomena, and that human ships had no hope against forces beyond their understanding. "It's a trap," one council member said sharply. "This signal was designed to lure us into danger." "There's no way it isn't." Others argued the opposite. They said ignoring the call would be a failure of humanity's moral responsibility. A civilization or something that called itself one was asking for help, and the message was unmistakably directed at humans. The debate grew heated, but in the end, curiosity and a sense of duty overruled caution. They could not turn away. On board the shuttle, Ryland kept a steady focus on the immediate challenges. He knew that the unknown often carried far greater danger than any weapon. "Everyone stay alert," he instructed, his voice calm but firm. "We don't know what we're approaching, but we will handle it as a team. Follow protocol and watch your instruments closely." The crew obeyed, though the tension was palpable. Even the most experienced members felt the weight of uncertainty pressing on them, a constant reminder that this mission was unlike anything they had faced before. The anomalies began to increase as they approached the coordinates provided by the signal. Asteroids seemed to shift slightly, as if moving out of the shuttle's path on purpose. Sensor readings went haywire, sometimes showing massive objects that were not there, and other times failing to detect things that should have been visible. Lights flickered intermittently in the cabin, and subtle tremors ran through the ship's structure, small but persistent. Rylan realized that the signal might not only be a call for help, it might also be interacting with the very fabric of space around them, altering the environment in ways they could not predict. Mara worked tirelessly to stabilize the readings and decode the patterns hidden in the signal. She noticed fragments of coordinates embedded within the pulses, hinting at locations far beyond known space, but the calculations were complicated. Every attempt to predict a safe path revealed even greater dangers. "It's like the sector itself is alive," she said under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. "Like it's testing us, or warning us to turn back." Rylan didn't respond immediately. He had heard such things from explorers before, tales of haunted regions and cursed sectors, but he had never encountered a situation that felt this deliberate. Despite the growing fear, the crew pressed on. The sense of purpose driving them was powerful, almost tangible. They had a mission now, one that felt far larger than themselves, and it demanded courage beyond ordinary limits. Each member of the team felt a mixture of fear and determination. Private thoughts swirled in their minds, visions of what they might find, what they could face, and what it might mean for humanity. Some imagined a thriving alien civilization waiting to welcome them. Others feared a deadly trap meant to annihilate their entire fleet. No one could know for sure, and that uncertainty was both thrilling and terrifying as they moved closer to the signal's origin. The anomalies intensified. Tiny asteroids that should have followed predictable orbits began to collide and break apart spontaneously. Energy surges pulsed through the shuttle, causing momentary blackouts in minor systems. Communication with the station became difficult, distorted by interference that seemed to come from nowhere. It was as if some invisible hand was manipulating the environment, testing the crew's ability to respond. Rylan, however, refused to let panic take hold. He gave orders calmly, adjusting the shuttle's trajectory and running simulations in "We adapt or we fail," he said quietly to Mara. She nodded, understanding the weight of his words. In this sector, mistakes could mean death. Suddenly, the signal shifted dramatically. Its pulse became rapid, almost frantic, and Mara realized that the source was trying to convey more than just location. It was issuing a warning. Data streams appeared within the signal, fragments of maps, schematics, and coordinates showing areas of extreme danger. There were warnings about gravitational anomalies, energy fields, and unidentified presences capable of obliterating ships in seconds. The crew stared at the displays in awe and fear. Whoever or whatever had sent this signal possessed knowledge and technology far beyond anything humans had encountered. The realization left a chilling impression. The sector was not only dangerous, it was defended, monitored, and understood by a force that might consider humanity insignificant. Despite the warnings, Rylan made a crucial decision. He would follow the signal, but with caution. He ordered the shuttle to proceed along a carefully calculated path, avoiding areas that appeared unstable while staying close enough to the source to maintain a connection. Each maneuver required precision and courage. The crew worked as one, adjusting speed, recalibrating sensors, and preparing for potential encounters with whatever awaited them. There was a shared sense of responsibility. Each person knew that their choices could determine the fate of not only themselves, but possibly humanity as a whole. Hours stretched into a day, and the shuttle approached the heart of the unknown sector. The signal pulsed stronger than ever, a persistent beat that seemed to resonate with the shuttle itself. Mara deciphered more fragments, revealing images of structures and objects unlike anything in human databases. They were massive, geometric, and seemingly artificial, but not like any human or known alien design. The signal was guiding them toward these formations, but war to what end remained a mystery. Rylan's gut told him that they were on the brink of discovering something monumental, something that would challenge everything humanity thought it knew about the galaxy. As they neared the final coordinates, an unspoken tension settled over the crew. Every sense was heightened, every instrument scrutinized. The silence of space felt heavier, almost oppressive. The signal's intensity grew, and with it, a sense of immediacy and danger. Rylan knew that the next few moments would define the entire mission. The unknown lay ahead, and the crew's bravery, skill, and cohesion would be tested like never before. He looked at each member of his team, noting their focus, their fear, and their determination. They were ready to face whatever waited beyond the visible horizon. Then, the first visual signs appeared. Massive shadows moved across the field of view, so distant at first that it was impossible to discern their nature. The shuttle's sensors picked up energy readings far exceeding anything previously recorded in the sector. Mara interpreted the data quickly, noting patterns that suggested coordination, intelligence, and purpose. The shadows were not random. They were part of something far larger, and they were reacting to the shuttle's presence. The realization struck the crew simultaneously. They had been led here intentionally, and they were no longer merely explorers, they were participants in a complex game, a challenge set by a force far beyond human understanding. Ryland's mind raced. He knew that turning back was still an option, but the signal's persistence, its urgency, and the potential for discovery outweighed caution. They had been chosen to answer this call, and failure to respond could have consequences far beyond their comprehension. Every decision now required calculation, courage, and trust in each other. The unknown ahead was immense, possibly deadly, but it also held knowledge, opportunity, and the chance to make history. And so, propelled by the signal's insistent pulse, guided by their training, and driven by an unshakable sense of duty, the shuttle pressed onward into the heart of the sector. The anomalies, the warnings, and the shadows were no longer abstract. They were immediate realities demanding attention, skill, and courage. The crew moved with precision and focus, each aware that the next encounter, the next revelation, could change everything. The universe had spoken, and they had answered. What lay ahead would test them to their limits, challenge their understanding, and force them to confront truths far greater than themselves. The shuttle's journey through the sector was not just a voyage through space. It was a passage into uncertainty, danger, and discovery. The signal had called, and humanity had chosen to respond. Every pulse, every anomaly, every shadow reinforced one undeniable fact. They were no longer observers. They were participants in a story far older and larger than anything they had imagined. And the full consequences of answering this signal were only just beginning to unfold. Asterisk. The shuttle moved cautiously into the area indicated by the mysterious signal, its engines quiet against the vastness of space. The crew was tense, every eye glued to the viewports, every hand hovering over controls, ready for any sudden anomaly. Commander Ryland could feel the weight of the mission pressing on him like a physical force. The signal had guided them this far, but now, as the shuttle drew closer to the source, the sense of anticipation had shifted to annoying unease. Something was waiting for them, and the emptiness around them seemed almost alive. At first, the signs were subtle. Instruments began registering small energy fluctuations that seemed to move in patterns, not unlike the pulsing rhythm of the signal itself. Shadows appeared on the scanners, moving with an intelligence that was impossible to ignore. Mara leaned forward, fingers flying across the holographic controls, trying to make sense of it all. "Sir, these readings, they're coordinated," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "It's not random. Whatever's out there, it's aware of us." Ryland didn't respond immediately. He was watching the view screens, trying to spot something visible, something tangible. But there was only darkness dotted with distant stars. Minutes passed, each one stretching like an eternity. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, shapes began to appear. Distant shadows moved across the void, immense forms that seemed to shift and shimmer as they approached. The sensors confirmed their worst fears. These were not natural phenomena. The readings suggested immense energy, enormous mass, and most terrifying of all, unintelligence operating on a scale beyond anything humanity had encountered. The shuttle's systems strained to interpret the data, but every new reading only made the reality clearer. They were surrounded by an armada, a fleet of ships unlike any known design, and it was massive. Ryland took a deep breath, steadying himself. "All units maintain formation," he ordered. "We don't know what we're dealing with, but we will proceed carefully. No sudden moves." The crew obeyed, though the tension was almost unbearable. Every movement, every flicker on the screens, was a reminder that they were in hostile territory and that the rules of engagement were unknown. Mara continued to study the signal's embedded instructions, hoping for guidance. But the more she deciphered, the more it became clear that this was not a rescue mission. It was a trap. The first visual confirmation of the fleet came when a massive shape passed directly between the shuttle and a distant star. It was enormous, dark, sleek, and alien in every sense. Its surface glimmered faintly as if reflecting the starlight, yet it was impossible to determine its material composition. Sensors attempted to scan it, but the readings were distorted, incomplete, and rapidly changing. "It's like it's phasing," Mara whispered, almost to herself. "We can't get a clear read. Every scan shows something different." Ryland's jaw tightened. They were no longer approaching the fleet. They had been surrounded, and the fleet was aware of their presence. As more ships emerged from the shadows, the scale became truly horrifying. Thousands of vessels appeared, spread across the darkness like a storm of predators. Their formations were precise, coordinated, and terrifyingly efficient. The sensors picked up energy signatures that suggested weapons capable of destroying the shuttle in seconds, yet the ships moved with a deliberate grace, as if they were observing, assessing, calculating. The crew exchanged anxious glances. They had expected danger, but the magnitude of what they faced was beyond comprehension. This was not merely a fleet, it was a force designed for total domination. Ryland tried to maintain calm. "Stay focused. Record everything. Analyze every movement," he instructed, though even his voice betrayed the tension building inside him. The shuttle was small, fast, and maneuverable, but against a fleet of this scale, those advantages felt insignificant. Mara continued decoding fragments of the original signal, searching for any clue, any hint that might explain why they had been led here. What she found only confirmed their fears. The signal had been carefully constructed to lure them into the heart of the Deathworlder fleet. It was a trap designed with patience, intelligence, and deadly precision. As the shuttle edged closer, the fleet reacted in subtle ways. Ships shifted slightly, formations adjusted, and energy readings spiked in response to the shuttle's movements. The crew realized with a chilling clarity that the fleet was not only aware of their presence, it was anticipating their actions. Every course correction, every adjustment, every hesitation was being watched, studied, and counted. The signal had called them here, but it had also ensured that they were now under constant scrutiny. The Deathworlders, as Rylan had come to understand them from fragmented reports and ancient archives, were predators of a different order, intelligent, relentless, and merciless. Then came the first confrontation, though it was subtle at first. A massive vessel appeared directly in the shuttle's path, moving without warning. The shuttle's sensors screamed a warning, but it was already too close to evade completely. Rylan took immediate control, executing a rapid series of maneuvers that narrowly avoided collision. The crew held their breath as the shuttle skidded past the enormous ship, systems straining under the sudden movements. "They're testing us," Mara said, her voice low, almost in awe. "This isn't an attack yet. They're evaluating." Rylan didn't respond, his focus entirely on keeping the shuttle alive. Hours passed in a tense, almost unbearable standoff. Every time the shuttle tried to advance, the fleet adjusted. Shadows moved, energy spikes pulsed, and communications signals were intercepted, scrambled, and partially blocked. It became increasingly clear that this was not a random trap. It was a calculated engagement designed to teach them their place in the universe. Humanity was small, fragile, and, in the eyes of the Deathworlders, insignificant. Yet the shuttle's crew continued to push forward, driven by a mix of duty, curiosity, and the need to survive. During a brief lull, Mara managed to extract additional data from the signal. Among the fragmented instructions were warnings about the fleet's weapon systems, hints about their coordination methods, and partial schematics that suggested how the ships communicated and executed maneuvers. It was incomplete, confusing, and almost impossible to interpret fully, but it provided a glimmer of hope. If the crew could analyze and understand these patterns quickly, they might find a way to survive. Rylan realized that this mission was no longer about exploration. It was a test of intellect, courage, and adaptability. The fleet, however, remained a constant and looming threat. Massive vessels loomed on all sides, their dark surfaces absorbing the distant starlight. Smaller, faster ships darted between them like predators within a pack, testing, probing, and scanning the shuttle's capabilities. Each encounter left the crew tense, hearts racing, as they narrowly avoided devastating energy discharges or collisions. Every second felt like a lifetime, and yet, despite the fear, a strange sense of determination took hold. They could not retreat, not now. The signal had led them here for a reason, and to turn back would be to surrender without understanding why. Rylan made a decision. "We document everything, every formation, every movement, every pulse. We learn from them. If they want to test us, we'll prove that we can adapt." The crew nodded, knowing the truth of his words. Survival required not only courage but understanding. The shuttle was small, vulnerable, and outmatched in every conceivable way. But it was also fast, nimble, and operated by a crew determined to survive. That determination, combined with careful observation, might be their only advantage against a fleet designed to overwhelm and annihilate. As the first signs of what could only be described as strategy emerged from the Deathworlder fleet, the crew realized something astonishing. This was not chaos. Every movement, every pulse, every adjustment was deliberate. The fleet's coordination suggested intelligence far beyond what humanity had encountered before. And yet, despite the overwhelming odds, there was a strange, almost fascinating beauty in their patterns. The crew could see glimpses of order in the apparent threat, and Mara worked furiously to understand it. Perhaps, she thought, understanding this order could be the key to survival. The hours stretched on, each one filled with tension, fear, and an almost unbearable sense of anticipation. The shuttle had moved from being an observer to a participant, a pawn in a game played on a scale they could barely comprehend. Every maneuver, every course correction, every attempt to stay safe was met with subtle adjustments from the fleet. The Deathworlders were patient, meticulous, and intelligent. They were predators in the truest sense, evaluating not just the shuttle's capabilities but the crew's decision-making, courage, and adaptability. By the time the shuttle reached the approximate center of the fleet's observation zone, the crew understood the terrifying truth. They were surrounded. There was no retreat, no escape. The fleet had been drawn out and positioned precisely by the signal, and now it was fully aware of their presence. Any misstep could result in instant destruction. And yet, despite the danger, the crew continued, driven by a mixture of fear, duty, and the unshakable hope that they could survive this encounter. In that moment, the enormity of the challenge became clear. The shuttle, small and fragile, was up against a force so vast, coordinated, and intelligent that survival seemed impossible. Yet the crew persisted, observing, learning, and adapting. They had entered the heart of the Deathworlder trap, and there was no turning back. What lay ahead would test not only their skills and courage, but their very understanding of what it meant to face an enemy that operated on a level far beyond humanity's comprehension. And so, trapped in the shadows of the Deathworlder fleet, the shuttle's crew continued. Every second a delicate balance between observation and survival, between fear and determination. The signal had called them forth, and now they had to face the consequences. The full scale of the fleet was revealed, their power immense, and their intelligence undeniable. Yet, within the shuttle, a spark of hope remained. If humanity could understand even a fraction of what they faced, they might just survive. The shuttle and its crew had been trapped in the looming shadow of the Deathworlder fleet for what felt like an eternity. The sheer scale and intelligence of the enemy's formations had left every member of the team tense, their nerves stretched to the breaking point. Every movement of the fleet was deliberate, precise, and almost predatory. Commander Rylan knew that any misstep could mean immediate destruction. Yet he also understood that panic would be more deadly than any alien weapon. They had observed the fleet for hours, noting patterns, movements, and energy signatures, slowly piecing together a map of the enemy's operations. Every moment of observation was critical. Every fragment of data could hold the key to survival. Mara had been working non-stop, analyzing the flow of information. She noticed subtle repetitions in the fleet's maneuvers, sequences that suggested predictability if interpreted correctly. "Sir, I think I've found something," she said, pointing to the holographic display. "Their ships move in patterns. They adjust based on the shuttle's actions. But there are gaps, timing inconsistencies, coordination points that aren't perfect. If we exploit these, we might be able to strike back, at least partially." Rylan studied the data carefully. It was a small window, a tiny advantage, but it was enough. The Deathworlders were powerful, yes, but they were not omniscient. Every system, every formation, every pattern had a flaw, and humanity's survival depended on identifying and exploiting it. The realization gave the crew a renewed sense of determination. Fear remained, but it was tempered by hope. Rylan called the crew together for a quick briefing. "We've been tested, and we're still here," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "We know more about them than they know about us. That's our advantage. We'll hit their weak points, create confusion, and force them to respond. Every move we make must be calculated, precise, and coordinated. We can survive this if we work together." The crew nodded, their faces a mix of determination and apprehension. They had been observers. Now they were about to become active participants in the battle for survival. The first strike had to be subtle. The shuttle, small and fast, was ill-equipped to confront the massive ships directly. Instead, Rylan devised a series of rapid maneuvers aimed at disrupting communication nodes within the fleet. Mara directed all power to the navigation systems, guiding the shuttle along routes that avoided detection while placing it in optimal positions to observe and interfere. Every pulse, every movement was carefully timed. The first attempt sent a ripple through the fleet. Sensors flared, energy spikes pulsed, and a massive ship adjusted its position abruptly. The crew held their breath, watching for the fleet's response. It came quickly, precise, but with a minor misstep, a slight lag in the coordination of the smaller vessels. That tiny flaw was enough. Rylan instructed the shuttle to exploit it, sending a precise electronic pulse aimed at a relay controlling multiple ships' movement. The effect was subtle but immediate. Several smaller ships veered off course, creating temporary gaps in the formation. The Deathworlders reacted quickly, but the disruption had already given the shuttle a critical advantage. Mara adjusted the pulse frequency to maintain the interference, and for a brief moment, the overwhelming fleet seemed slightly less impenetrable. The crew exhaled collectively, realizing that strategy, intelligence, and courage could counter brute force. Humanity's ingenuity was proving its worth. Encouraged by the initial success, Rylan pressed forward. He coordinated a series of maneuvers designed to stretch the fleet's formation, creating zones of temporary weakness. Each action was calculated, each movement precise, and each response from the Deathworlders carefully monitored. The shuttle moved like a needle threading through a storm, weaving between massive vessels, exploiting gaps, and creating confusion. Mara's analysis became increasingly vital, decoding energy patterns and predicting reactions before they occurred. The crew had shifted from fear to focused action, adapting rapidly to a threat that had once seemed insurmountable. The Deathworlders, however, were not idle. Their intelligence and coordination quickly became apparent as they began adjusting formations, anticipating some of the shuttle's moves. Yet, even in their precision, the crew noticed moments of imperfection. Every strategy had its limits, and every calculation carried a margin of error. Rylan knew that exploiting these small flaws was humanity's only hope. He instructed the shuttle to simulate retreats and sudden advances, baiting the fleet into overextending itself. The crew executed these maneuvers flawlessly, creating a dynamic, an unpredictable pattern that began to disrupt the previously impenetrable formation. Hours passed in a tense cycle of observation, interference, and tactical maneuvers. The shuttle, despite its small size, had managed to cause several minor disruptions within the Deathworlder fleet. Sensors recorded slight deviations in energy output, ship movements, and formation adjustments. Each disruption, though temporary, revealed the limits of the fleet's coordination and suggested new strategies. The crew's morale, previously frayed by fear, was slowly improving. They had faced what seemed to be an unbeatable force, and yet, through observation, intelligence, and daring, they had begun to assert themselves in the encounter. The turning point came when Mara identified a central hub controlling a section of the fleet's smaller ships. If they could disable it, even briefly, it could create a cascade of disruption, forcing the fleet to react and potentially overextend. Rylan formulated a plan. The shuttle would approach the hub under the cover of interference, deliver a precise electronic pulse, and then retreat before the Deathworlders could respond. Every second counted. Every move had to be flawless. The crew prepared, checking systems, stabilizing the shuttle, and rehearsing the sequence mentally. The tension was immense, but the focus was absolute. The maneuver began. The shuttle darted forward, weaving through a gauntlet of ships, guided by Mara's precise calculations. Energy readings fluctuated wildly, alarms sounded intermittently, and the shuttle's systems strained under the demands. Yet the crew moved as one, their coordination flawless. The central hub came into view, a massive vessel pulsing with energy, its surface bristling with sensors and antennas. Mara initiated the pulse sequence. For a brief moment, the shuttle seemed invisible to the hub, a ghost moving through the fleet. Then the pulse was released. The effect was immediate. Smaller ships within the hub's control veered off course. Formation gaps appeared, and energy output fluctuated chaotically. The Deathworlders responded quickly, but the disruption had already given the shuttle the advantage it needed. Rylan guided the ship back along a carefully calculated route, avoiding direct confrontation while maintaining observation of the fleet's responses. The crew exhaled in unison, a rare moment of relief amidst the tension. They had struck the death, not with brute force, but with intelligence, strategy, and courage. This success, though small in the grand scale of the fleet, that had a profound impact on the crew's morale. They realized that the Deathworlders, for all their power, were not invincible. Every calculation, every analysis, and every daring maneuver mattered. Humanity's ingenuity could counter even overwhelming force. Rylan emphasized this to the crew. We've seen their strength. Yes, but we've also seen their limits. Every move we make now counts. We can survive this if we continue to observe, adapt, and act strategically. The crew nodded, renewed determination shining in their eyes. As the battle continued, the shuttle engaged in a series of hit-and-run maneuvers, each designed to test the fleet's reactions, gather data, and create confusion. The Deathworlders, for all their coordination, were forced to respond, adjusting formations and energy output. Every adjustment revealed new patterns, weaknesses, and opportunities. The crew worked tirelessly, decoding every fragment of data, predicting every response, and acting with precision. The small victories accumulated, creating a growing sense of confidence. Humanity was no longer merely surviving, they were learning, adapting, and asserting themselves. The culmination of this phase came when the shuttle successfully caused a minor but significant disruption in one of the fleet's larger formations. Several massive vessels had to adjust positions to compensate, creating temporary gaps in the previously seamless lines. Mara quickly identified these gaps, suggesting maneuvers that could further exploit them if necessary. Rylan weighed the risks carefully, deciding against overextending the shuttle's capabilities. The goal was not total destruction, but survival and understanding. Each maneuver, each disruption, each observation brought them closer to comprehending the Deathworlder's strategy. By the end of this exhausting sequence, the shuttle had achieved something remarkable. Against overwhelming odds, a small human crew had disrupted the operations of an immensely powerful fleet. They had proven that intelligence, observation, and daring could counter brute force. The crew was exhausted, yet exhilarated. They had faced what seemed impossible, adapted to an enemy far superior in strength and numbers, and emerged not only alive but with valuable knowledge that could influence future engagements. Rylan reflected on what they had learned. The Deathworlders were formidable, yes, but they were not perfect. Their intelligence was immense, but not absolute. Their coordination was precise, but small flaws existed. Humanity's resilience, courage, and ingenuity had turned these weaknesses into opportunities for survival. The crew had demonstrated that even in the face of overwhelming force, strategy and adaptation could tip the balance. And so, amidst the shadows of the Deathworlder fleet, humanity had struck back. The shuttle had survived, the crew had learned, and a sense of cautious hope began to emerge. The battle was far from over, but the first step had been taken. Humanity had shown that even against an almost unstoppable force, courage, intelligence, and unity could create opportunities, disrupt plans, and perhaps, just perhaps, changed the course of the encounter entirely. The battle had left a deep mark on everyone aboard the shuttle. Commander Rylan and his crew had survived an encounter that many had deemed impossible. The Deathworlder fleet, a vast and terrifying force, that had been tested in ways that humans could scarcely imagine. And while the shuttle had emerged intact, the enormity of what had occurred weighed heavily on them. The silence of space now felt both like a relief and a warning, a reminder of the immense power that still lurked in the darkness. Each member of the crew felt a mixture of exhaustion, awe, and cautious hope. They had faced overwhelming odds and lived to tell the story, as the shuttle slowly moved away from the central region of the fleet's activity. Rylan allowed himself a moment to assess the situation. The energy readings showed that Deathworlders had begun a partial withdrawal, retreating just enough to re-establish their formations and assess the effects of the disruptions the shuttle had caused. Mara and the rest of the crew monitored the patterns carefully, noting every adjustment, every subtle change in movement. The Deathworlders were intelligent and patient. They would not strike recklessly again, not without careful consideration. For humanity, this was both a relief and a reminder. The enemy was still out there, and the danger was far from over. Rylan called the crew together. "We've survived, but we must remain vigilant," he said, his voice steady despite the fatigue that tugged at him. "We've learned a lot about them. Their patterns, their weaknesses, their reactions. Every piece of data we gather now is crucial. The fleet may retreat for now, but they will remember what we did, and we must be prepared for whatever comes next." The crew nodded, understanding that survival was not only about evading immediate danger but about learning, adapting, and preparing for future encounters. They had survived the first test, but the journey was far from complete. As they navigated the remnants of the fleet's domain, the crew began to document their experiences in meticulous detail. Mara continued to analyze the data, decoding energy pulses, mapping formations, and interpreting subtle fluctuations in movement. Each discovery added to a growing picture of the Deathworlders' capabilities, revealing not only their strengths but also the vulnerabilities that humanity had managed to exploit. The small victories had given the crew confidence, but they also served as a reminder of how fragile that success truly was. One mistake, one miscalculation, could have meant complete annihilation. The shuttle encountered scattered debris from the earlier disruptions. Small vessels and fragments floated silently, frozen in the void. The crew observed them closely, noting the effects of their maneuvers on the fleet. These remnants were stark reminders of the Deathworlders' destructive potential, and yet, in observing them, the crew also gained invaluable insight. The positions, trajectories, and energy signatures of the debris revealed aspects of the fleet's internal coordination and highlighted the areas where human intervention had caused temporary disruption. Every fragment was a lesson, a clue, a testament to both the danger they faced and the effectiveness of their strategy. Despite the relief of survival, tension remained. The shuttle's systems had been pushed to their limits, and the crew was exhausted from hours of intense observation, calculation, and maneuvering. Sleep was impossible, replaced instead by constant vigilance. Each crew member took turns monitoring instruments, watching for changes in the fleet's behavior, and recording every anomaly. The universe around them felt alive with potential threats, each pulse and shadow a possible indication of unseen dangers. Rylan understood that their survival had not been guaranteed by luck but by constant attention, quick thinking, and the willingness to act decisively when opportunity presented itself. As the shuttle moved further away, they began to notice subtle changes in the fleet's behavior. The Deathworlders were still organized, still immensely powerful, but their withdrawal was deliberate rather than panicked. Mara's analysis suggested that they were regrouping, studying the effects of the shuttle's interference, and preparing for future encounters. This insight was both reassuring and alarming. It meant that humanity had not been destroyed, but it also confirmed that the fleet would not forget, that it would learn, adapt, and possibly return with even greater force. The stakes were far higher than anyone had imagined, and the shuttle's crew realized that their role in this encounter was far from over. Amidst this tension, small moments of humanity emerged. Crew members shared quiet conversations, reflecting on what they had witnessed and the narrow margins by which they had survived. They spoke of fear, awe, and determination, bonding over the shared experience. These moments of connection were vital, grounding them in the knowledge that, even against overwhelming power, human resilience, courage, and collaboration could prevail. Each crew member understood that their individual skills had contributed to the collective effort, and that teamwork had been the key to navigating the terrifying encounter as they approached the outer limits of the fleet's domain. Rylan reflected on the lessons they had learned. The Deathworlders were a force beyond comprehension, capable of destruction on a scale humanity had never faced. Yet, despite their overwhelming power, they were not infallible. Their patterns could be studied, their movements anticipated, and their reactions exploited. Humanity's strength lay not in raw power but in intelligence, adaptability, and the courage to act decisively. These lessons would shape future strategies, not just for the crew aboard the shuttle, but for all of humanity. The shuttle's sensors detected no immediate threats as they moved farther from the fleet, but the crew remained alert. Mara continued to decode fragments of the signal, noting patterns that suggested the Deathworlders had a deeper understanding of human technology than had been anticipated. This knowledge underscored the importance of careful observation and strategic thinking. The crew realized that survival was not merely about evading destruction but about learning, anticipating, and preparing for the challenges yet to come. Each discovery reinforced the idea that intelligence and strategy could counter even the most overwhelming force. By the time the shuttle had reached a safe distance, the immediate danger had passed, but the emotional and psychological impact of the encounter remained. The crew had faced a fleet designed for total domination and survived. They had disrupted operations, exploited vulnerabilities, and gained invaluable knowledge. Yet, the weight of what they had experienced was profound. The enormity of the Deathworlders' power and intelligence left a lasting impression, a constant reminder that humanity's survival depended not on luck but on courage, strategy, and unity. The journey home was quiet, filled with reflection and meticulous documentation. Mara compiled the data, highlighting the key insights and potential strategies for future encounters. Rylan and the crew discussed the lessons learned, noting areas where human ingenuity had made a critical difference and identifying moments where mistakes could have been fatal. Every action, every observation, every decision was analyzed, contributing to a growing understanding of the Deathworlders and the ways in which humanity could adapt to confront them in the future. Despite the relief of survival, there was no celebration. The encounter had been too close, too dangerous, and the stakes far too high. The crew understood that they had been fortunate, that the margin for error had been raised, yet there was a sense of accomplishment and cautious optimism. Humanity had survived a trial that few could have imagined, and in doing so, had demonstrated that intelligence, courage, and collaboration could counter even the most formidable adversary. The lessons learned in this encounter would inform strategy, training, and preparation for years to come. As they neared the station, the crew prepared to report their findings. Every detail mattered. The fleet's formations, energy patterns, communication methods, and subtle weaknesses. Rylan understood that the knowledge they had gained was priceless. It would allow humanity to prepare, adapt, and potentially survive future encounters with the Death. The shuttle had survived, but more importantly, had returned with insight that could change the course of history. When the shuttle finally docked at the station, the crew was met with cautious relief. Commanders and analysts gathered to hear their report, eager to learn from the experiences of those who had ventured into the heart of the Deathworlder fleet. Mara and the crew presented their findings with precision, outlining the fleet's strengths, weaknesses, and behavior patterns. Every observation, every calculation, every disruption was documented. Humanity had not only survived but had gained the knowledge necessary to confront overwhelming power with strategy, courage, and adaptability. The encounter would be remembered as a turning point. The Deathworlders had tested humanity, calling forth a force that few believed could be confronted successfully. Yet the shuttle and its crew had demonstrated that even against seemingly insurmountable odds, intelligence, courage, and collaboration could prevail. The lessons learned would guide future generations, inform strategic planning, and serve as a testament to human resilience. The fleet might still loom in the darkness of space, but humanity had proven that it could respond, adapt, and survive. As the crew settled into recovery, a quiet reflection settled over them. They had faced a force of unimaginable scale and survived. They had disrupted the Deathworlder fleet, learned its patterns, and returned with knowledge that could shape humanity's future. The encounter had tested their courage, skill, and resolve, but it had also revealed a profound truth. Even in the face of overwhelming power, strategy, intelligence, and unity could tip the balance. Humanity had survived, learned, and grown stronger. The universe was vast, full of dangers and mysteries yet to be discovered. The Deathworlders had withdrawn for now, but they remained a constant presence in the minds of humanity's leaders and strategists. The shuttle's mission had been a success, not merely in survival, but in knowledge, insight, and proof that humanity could face forces far beyond its immediate comprehension. The lessons of this encounter would resonate for years, shaping strategies, preparing fleets, and reminding all who listened that courage, intelligence, and unity were humanity's greatest weapons. And so, as the shuttle returned to safe space, the crew understood the significance of what they had accomplished. They had faced a challenge that had tested every skill, every instinct, and every ounce of courage they possessed. The Deathworlders were still out there, powerful and intelligent, but humanity had proven that even the most formidable forces could be observed, understood, and, if necessary, countered. The journey was far from over, but the first step had been taken, and humanity had survived.